emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 1194.JB1312. Certificate number 54825. Space Contraband.
Utility 6. We have an object, looks like a satellite, going from north to south, probably in a polar orbit. He's in a very low trajectory, traveling from north to south. Stand by one. Looks like he's trying to signal something.
We're going to talk about Corellian smugglers like Han Solo.
Yeah, he made the he made the parsec run in 74 Kessels.
This is not going to be people smuggling things from space. This is people smuggling things into space, which you have to do because otherwise there's nothing there. It's empty. That's why they call it space.
There's all of matter.
If you don't no, matter's everywhere that's not space.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
If you don't
I think of everything that's not Earth as space, but you're right. It's spaces.
If you don't smuggle none, there ain't going to be none.
But wait a minute. Are you saying smuggling to space in order to leave it in space, or smuggling it to space in order to bring it back and sell it on the internet?
Ooh, I guess there are both kinds of smuggling operations going on in today's entry, which I guess isn't the omnibus law that every time we talk about space, we have to start off by bemoaning Gen X childhoods and missing the boat on space.
God, we ought to have hovercrafts. We should have space. My daughter was like, should I watch 2001: A Space Odyssey? She said this yesterday. And I said, yes, but caveat, it's from a time when movies
were long and had no dialogue for 40 minutes at a time.
They were not trying to entertain you exactly so much as immerse you. And she was like, well, what does that mean?
It's not a typical movie.
That's true.
Most of I'm sure Oliver came out several months later and everybody happily skipped home from the theater. But this was a movie you were supposed to take mushrooms before.
Yeah, but also, the wedding scene in Deer Hunter lasts for an hour and a half and it's just a wedding. So it was a time of slower pacing, yes. But this movie for sure. And I said, it's 1969's idea of what 2000 would be. And she said, 1969?
She couldn't imagine something so old.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, it still was 30 years to the year 2000.
They thought Pan Am would be in business.
Yeah. So, but I said, why don't we pause on 2001: A Space Odyssey? Because I watched it when I was 40 for the 30th time, and I still was like, this is wow.
I think at least one of my kids was about her age, and it became his favorite movie.
Oh, okay, all right, good. Well, she loves.
I think it's good to forewarn them that the apes might not talk for half an hour.
Yeah.
And then the aliens won't talk for half an hour.
And there's a long, maybe really long period of time where our protagonist is living in an apartment.
It's a pretty nice apartment.
Pretty nice, but there's no windows.
There's no windows. It's a casino. The aliens put him in a casino.
I just feel like...
You can't call that a bedroom. There's no window.
And so she's going to say, well, what's the fun part? And I'm like, well, there's a guy on a treadmill. And...
there's an evil computer. That's the fun part.
That's right.
We were...
Close the pod bay doors, Ken.
Because I was raised by Children of the Atom? No, it's raised by, I guess, Children of the Space Race. Like, my dad was born in 49. That's right down the plate for early boomers.
He was born in 49.
Yeah.
Huh, yeah.
Yeah, we always talk about how my dad and you are the same age.
Yeah.
No, but he's 20 years younger than your dad, basically.
Well, no, my brother David was born in 49.
Right.
He's not still alive, though, whereas your dad is just rolling.
Vigorous. He's probably chopping up firewood right now.
Yeah. He's out there in Port Townsend thinking up some emails to send you.
Yeah, or he's ham radioing Uruguay right now. But he was, he kind of had I saw his science-y personality that had been produced by the space race. This was a guy who didn't have a telescope or a bird-watching life guide or a...
So he had a chemistry kit, like a home...
As a kid, for sure. But when I'm a kid, he also has an old vacuum tube radio he's tinkering with. And, as soon as personal computers were a thing, he's assembling his own...
ENIAC.
He's assembling his own ENIAC. That's right. He's like, long division must be faster.
TRS-80. Did he teach you that stuff, or was he just out tinkering on his tube radio? And when you came in, he was like, "Get out!"
No. He was. I think that was his. That was his only like parenting lifeboat. Was like, I feel like I know how to like show a kid to look through a telescope,
right,
or to bird watch.
And was that did that all stick with you? I mean, I know you still stare at your hummingbird feeder.
Yeah, but it's always one generation removed.
Right.
Like if you have very religiously devout parents, you're going to be somewhat devout.
Sure.
If you have a very scientific parent, you're going to be somewhat scientific. So I can also have my kids look through a telescope and find the moons of Jupiter, but I'm not as good at it as he was. And
are they also
I'm
less scientific?
I'm less conversant with and probably even more so to them. But I think it was like not until pretty recently that I realized a lot of this was revisionism. Are you aware of the idea
that moons of Jupiter?
Nope. In fact,
oh no,
Galileo just had sneezed on the lens.
I mean, tell me it's not a liberal conspiracy. Please make it a conservative conspiracy. There are too many liberal ones.
Yeah, liberals are putting moons around Jupiter now. No, just the idea that space was that the moon landing was phenomenal. It brought the world together, that the Apollo program was always incredibly popular, and then it was only after 69. It was only once we get into the 70s that the bloom is off the rose.
Well, Whitey's on the moon.
Well, that's the thing. In fact, we talk about that like that's kind of it's a radical or activist position to complain about the moon landing, because who would do that? You've got to be some Gil Scott-Heron level outsider to think that.
It's got to be the 70s where we're crumbling now.
No, but here's the crazy thing. The Apollo program was never popular. Gallup polled people from Sputnik on to Apollo 17 about what they thought of NASA. And there was never a year when more than 50% of people thought the space race was a good idea.
But we're going to beat the Russians to the moon.
It was 69. Like in 1969, the year that we landed on the moon, and we retroactively remember the world stopping for this biggest moment in history, the peak of civilization. In fact, that was the only year that 50 or 51% of Americans were in favor of the space race.
Wow. Well, what the heck? What were Americans in favor of then?
Supermarkets? Yes. I mean, a lot of it was, this is really expensive. And they weren't wrong. Three times, the Apollo program cost 3 times our annual spend on the Manhattan Project, even adjusted for inflation.
And look what it produced.
I mean, that's self-evident. But I mean, that's the other thing you can point to where it's like, suddenly we got a big initiative up and going because the most important thing to defend the free world would be to win this particular race.
But what is it comparable to in what we spend today on stupid stuff?
At some point, it was over 2% of the budget, which sounds small, but think about how many line items there are in the federal budget. I mean, that's what we spend today on education. That's what food stamps cost today.
2%.
2%, yeah. And, that was at the height of Apollo. I'm sure NASA's budget is nowhere near that today. And it's the kind of thing where when you poll people, they'll be like, space is too expensive. And then you say, if I told you that it was only 1.5% of the budget, 1967, suburban dweller. Now what do you say? And then you can get better answers.
So it says here that transportation is 2% of the U.S. federal budget, but Social Security, 22%.
I mean, that's the thing. It's all defense and entitlements.
No, defense, it says, is only 13%. Social Security is the big one. Nanny state. Keeping old people from being poor.
Like the time when the moon landing was the most popular is the farther you get from the moon landing. Like today, if you poll the moon landing, it's like 90%. When we were kids, it was like 79%. But when we were littler kids, or around the time of our birth, it's still like 59%. And then throughout the 60s, only 35 to 45% of Americans support. We choose to go to the moon.
You know why? Because there wasn't science fiction. There's so much science. I mean, starting when I was a kid, right? All of a sudden, it
was outsider stuff.
Yeah, we had spacecrafts and stuff, but it still felt like
that's often the rebuttal. Like, given the cultural footprint of space, you cannot believe these poll numbers. And I think what the pollsters will say is, yeah, there's a ton of space media, and it's being bought by, all those toys are being bought by 10% of us.
Yeah, I guess that's right.
And that's not true anymore in the Star Wars era, where this stuff is no longer weirdos reading pulps, when it really is mass entertainment. But I'm sure a lot of people who were watching 60s space movies enthusiastically thought space was too expensive, and a lot of it came from the left. Like, right. Like Whitey's on the Moon is not, the famous Gil Scott-Heron piece is not an outlier. Every black paper in America took a strong editorial line against the space race for the reasons you think. Like, right. The country's falling apart. Apparently, we don't have money for social programs. Watts is burning. And yet, why do we have all this money for Vietnam and this stupid vanity project on the moon? This doesn't make anybody's lives better.
Yeah, the New Frontier was about social programs, not about Whitey being on the moon.
And the rhetoric was very good. Like, you read some of these editorials today, and it's like, of course we're sending white boys to the moon because there's no work to be done up there. They're going to pick up one rock. If you needed somebody to fill a wheelbarrow with rocks, you bring up somebody from our community.
I mean, you would read that exact kind of stuff now on the internet. That's what the internet is so good at.
That's what it's good at. Yeah, but back then it wasn't Twitter. You had to read the Los Angeles Inquirer or whatever the black community paper was. The New York Times would poll people on what the most pressing issues were facing the country.
And the moon wasn't?
It's so big and shiny. Well, from the Kennedy speech, you get the idea that everybody agrees, like, this is now what the Cold War is. We choose to go to the moon. And in fact, if you ask America, there's like, it never makes the top 5.
I bet you the Cold War wasn't as popular with most Americans as it was with me as a 12-year-old.
You loved the Cold War. You were like, when is Clint Eastwood going to make Firefox?
Well, that's exactly right. The MiG-25, it can go Mach 4, probably, maybe.
But here's the eye-opener. You know who else was like kind of opposed to the space race?
The Russians?
No, they loved it as long as they were winning. They loved it until like the mid-'60s.
The Australians, because Space Lab was going to land on them?
Scientists.
Huh?
If you were a non-NASA affiliated scientist, you thought this was a huge boondoggle.
Oh, right, because we could be curing disease.
Exactly. Like, there's so much to be done here on Earth. Instead, what you're doing is what they called it was cash and crater. I think no pun intended. Like, you're pouring a ton of money into this scientific industry that has never existed, and it's all going to go away. Eisenhower's Scientific Advisory Council told him in 1958 that in fact it is not in the national interest to explore space if it's ever to the distraction or exclusion of what Earth science does.
Which it almost certainly would be.
Well, in some ways there's a zero-sum game. You're taking all this manpower and all these smart engineers and all this money that it could go to crops.
Building cold fusion machines.
It could go to dams and nuclear power plants and atoms for peace, but no. And in fact, a poll of scientists during the 60s, of the 113 non-NASA scientists polled, 110 of them disagreed with Kennedy's goal and timeline.
Whoa.
Like, go to the moon within this decade. Like, they were like, nope, it's too fast. There's no reason to get manned moon missions.
MMM.
Triple M should not be a priority. Instead, here's 10 other things that actually will move the needle.
Yeah, but what did NASA scientists think? 110%
of NASA scientists said, more money, please. And they just thought, this is not going to last. Like, And they were proven right. It was cache and crater. Within 4 years of the moon landing, the whole thing is effectively mothballed because what little political will there was that persisted through. And a lot of it was, Nixon trying to keep the dream alive and in memory of the Kennedys.
I mean, Jimmy Carter roller skated to work. It's not like he's going to be pouring money into space.
Nobody wanted to pour money into space. NASA's perpetually underfunded for the kind of things that cool space nerds like us think will be cool. And as a kid, you never understood it. But then you read this stuff and you're like, oh, this was the mainstream American position among left, right, scientists, working families.
So when did the narrative that exploring space was an inspirational, this is what human beings do, we keep pushing the boundaries, we have to go to space because it's the next frontier, the final
Yeah, our big
frontier.
touchstone for that is 1966 to 1969, Star Trek is on. So that's the peak of the Apollo program. And it's kind of funny to think of that as a propaganda arm for NASA's...
Star Trek?
Yeah, to think of Star Trek as a propaganda arm
For theremins.
for space is good.
Yeah,
Like it's not to the exclusion of our social dreams and our social betterment. Like it's all a thing. This is how we get better as a people is through space.
When did satellites start providing tangible benefits to working Americans? I mean, now when we think of satellites, it's all of telecommunications, it's all of weather. Like we use satellites.
Yeah, the weather and the GPS stuff was slow. I mean, as Helen Mirren reminded us recently, Kurt Cobain never got to use GPS. Did you see that interview?
No, that was her takeaway.
Some interview where Helen Mirren, for some reason, is marveling about GPS and
Maybe he'd still be alive.
just how sad exactly that would have forestalled him if he'd been like, "This is amazing. Look at this little dot."
Did you think that
It's moving with me.
maybe GPS is why you and I are still alive? But alternate universe, there's like a dead Ken who's like, I can't even know where I am.
But yeah, telecommunications for sure. I don't know. The question is how good NASA was at messaging this stuff. Because by the time you and I were born, I think we knew the insulation in our homes is so much better because of space.
That's right.
This plastic is so much better because of space.
Tang alone sold us all on the game. But I mean, I think that NASA understood public relations because they employed a bunch of Nazi rocket scientists. And everybody's like, what are we going to do with these Nazis?
To you, the high water mark of public relations is the Third Reich?
We got to do something with them. Otherwise, they're going to be, cooking up the bomb somewhere in Argentina.
No, that was the premise of that ScarJo movie from last year that, these advertisers are really trying to get NASA to embrace this stuff, and the bureaucrats and the scientists and the engineers and the astronauts are all against it. That it really takes outside consultants kicking and screaming to be like, we need Tang on TV,
I never miss a Scarlett Johansson joint because, I celebrate her entire catalog, but I did not watch that movie. Was it good?
It's fine. It's fine.
Well,
it's not
that's too bad.
It's it's weirdly long for what it is.
Is she great though? Is she effervescent?
Oh, she's always great.
Yeah.
It does end with them faking the moon landing, which is a confusing third act twist.
Boo.
But not really.
Don't do that.
It's like they wink to it, but they don't really do it.
Ken, you were talking to me the other day about your experience watching some masterclass videos at masterclass.com.
Yeah, I've become a member of... How many times can we say the word masterclass?
Well, why don't we test it out?
Let's see how many.
I wonder, we should do a masterclass on how many times you can say masterclass.
I have always been a big believer in lifelong learning.
Yes.
Why not be learning something new every day? Don't stagnate.
It's why you're a podcast host and a television host, because you know so many darn things.
I am pretty omnivorously curious. And I have to say that Masterclass is right up my alley. Immediately just on opening the site and becoming a member, there were 10 classes I wanted to watch.
Yeah, same experience.
I dived right in. Amy Poehler was talking about comedy, Questlove. And these classes are, just amazing hours of content. It was like discovering a new book or a new podcast, but a full library of them.
Yeah. Right. And listening to, say, for instance, I hear this from people that listen to Omnibus and they just pick the topics that they're interested in. They're missing some of our great banter and great ad reads. But Masterclass is the same, except probably even more profoundly. You can go on there and really target your interests, or also just be a generalist and listen to experts talk about all their fields.
And here's the genius of it. Masterclass as a gift idea.
I love that.
Buy somebody a membership, and then for the rest of the year, they can check out those deep cuts, and they'll be grateful. Boy, they'll remember your gift.
This is the kind of thing where you're sitting around, you're like, I watch too much TV. I spend too much time looking at my phone. What's a thing that I can do that I can still not have to put my clothes on and go outside and
feel good about myself?
And watching Masterclass, it's like going to college, right?
You can learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. It's unlimited learning, and you could pay less for it because they got deals going during the holidays.
That's right. Masterclass always has great offers during the holidays, sometimes as much as 50% off.
Ooh.
So head over to masterclass.com/omnibus to find out the current offers.
For your smart, hard-to-shop for loved ones, you can get up to 50% off at masterclass.com/omnibus.
Do away with commercial garbage products and get Masterclass.
Masterclass.com/omnibus. Anyway, so the fact is, it's not like there was some golden age where everybody was thrilling to this kind of Tom Hanks, Ron Howard view of space. That's really our generation that invented that. It was the...
At least Gen X did something.
In fact, at the time, the space race was a time of constant headlines about cost overruns and crazy distractions, and that's kind of where the story of space contraband begins. We take you now to March 23rd, 1965, and the launch of Gemini 3, or as astronauts would say,
Gemini
3,
Come on.
Gemini Cricket. If the funny thing is, this was, okay, even though it's Gemini 3, this is the first two-man crew, the first Gemini mission that took two American astronauts into orbit. And I asked Google if this was the first time two people had ever been in space.
Gotta have been a cosmonaut.
At once, because that's what I thought. And Google's stupid new automated AI results tell me that, yep, Gemini 3, first time there were ever two men in space.
And some college kid wrote that in a paper, handed it in.
It doesn't even know where it gets it. It's scraping it from all kinds of... It's like the sum total of the vibes of 1,000 different space facts.
And what is the truth?
In fact, Voskhod 2, as you say, had a two-man crew, I think the previous week. So This was the second, NASA was still a week behind the Ruskies.
Right.
When it came to...
That's the whole plot of the 60s.
Two-man space capsules. This was a big deal. Gemini was going to do the kinds of things that would make a moon mission possible. They were going to be in orbit for longer. They could try spacewalks. They could try docking. They could try different kinds of maneuvers in orbit.
That's the thing. Our stuff was always more interesting, but they were always they had a two-man crew. I mean, one of the guys was tied to the outside of the craft, but still,
half of the craft is made of jute for some reason. it's like tied together with a rope.
Yeah.
But in this case, the Russians got there first. But on Gemini 3, the two astronauts aboard are Gus Grissom.
I was just about to say Gus Grissom.
Is he your guess?
Yeah.
And I think, if I remember right, I think that makes him the first guy to go to space twice, because none of the Gagarin and none of those guys ever went back. And Alan Shepard got he got scrubbed from Gemini for some kind of health thing.
Oh, it wasn't for racing his Corvette up and down to Daytona Beach?
No, that gets you a promotion, I think. That's what the PR guys want. But so he's one of the two astronauts on board Gemini 3. The other one is John Young, who later became, I think he was
a congressman from Ohio, true? Right? No, maybe not.
John Glenn? John Young was he stayed with NASA so long, he also flew the first space shuttle mission. Oh. At the time, he had more hours in space than anybody else, until space station time started clocking up. And at the time, these guys were in space for 5 hours, and a lot of the experiments they were going to do is, what's it like to be in space for 3 days? So that meant a lot of
You can't figure that out in 5 hours.
What will you eat on the way to, well, let's give them some I think
Energy bar.
John Glenn had like a tube of applesauce. Like you'd squirt in a little water and squeeze the tube like it was a Otter Pop, and then you just squish it. But they knew that wasn't going to hack it for, the days it would take to get to the moon and back.
And roast beef sandwich is not like part of the NASA.
It is not. It's a very important part of this story. But they are giving them like better things than goo in tubes. Like, what if we gave them like freeze-dried chicken, but it's dipped in gelatin so it sticks together? Because they're always worried about stuff getting around the capsule in zero G, right?
Yeah, freeze-dried chicken.
And there's grapefruit juice. There's all these things that they're trying as part of their thing. It's like, all right, we're at, mission, 2 hours and 8 minutes. Now it's time to try out the grapefruit juice protocol.
Oh, so this isn't actually to feed them. It's more to test whether it feeds them.
But face it, it's 5 hours,
Yeah.
They've all gone 5 hours without food.
Yeah.
It can be their little...
We do it every time we do Omnibus.
We do. It's our little Yom Kippur every time we do Omnibus. No, you go upstairs and eat food, don't you?
No, I just get another coffee. Coffee is the food of people who drink coffee, Ken.
I always assumed you were just eating a bowl of Cinnamon Life while you were up there.
There is not a single food in me right now. Oh, except for that toast that my sister made us both.
That was good. That was
There's
more than I usually eat on Omnibus Day.
Yeah, me too.
So the astronauts are famously complaining about the food, even once it is no longer Otter Pops. And a day or two before Gemini 3 launched, so this would have been at the end of March 65.
Did the astronauts not complain about something?
Yeah.
Because it seems like they complained about that's their primary job.
The right stuff is just 3 hours of astronauts being, there should be a window. This sucks. I just want to sleep with my wife. Please let me go to the other motel. No. There's always some guy with a crew cut telling them no.
9. I mean, no.
Yeah, some guy with longer hair telling them 9. A day or two before launch, none other than Wally Schirra, also one of the Mercury 7, drives into Cocoa Beach and goes to Wolfie's Restaurant and Sandwich Shop and gets a delicious sandwich, but also orders to go a corned beef sandwich.
To-go corned beef. This is how many days before launch?
A day or two. Hopefully he puts it in the fridge.
I mean, how long can a corned beef sandwich stay fresh?
I mean, it's not going to be good.
Okay.
I mean, it's not going to be great, right? Is
he doing this to make a point, or is he doing this because he wants a corned beef sandwich in space?
Well,
or it can both be true.
He's not one of the two astronauts. He may have been dispatched because that sandwich ends up in the pocket of John Young, one of the two astronauts flying the mission.
Potentially as a gag?
I think, yeah, as here's a little gift. Like, we all joke about how bad the gelatin cubes are.
Right.
I went to a deli.
That's good.
It's the closest New York style deli. And
those guys were a bunch of nuts.
John Young pulls out a corned beef on rye, and you can hear in the transcript Grissom commenting as he starts to eat it. And you can also hear them commenting because you can see NASA is right on this point, and rye bread crumbs just start floating everywhere. And the sandwich, that's a hazard. If it gets into a switch.
Seems like a hazard.
Suddenly you can't stir the tanks, or you stir the tanks twice, or whatever it is that gives you an Apollo 13. And the sandwich is wrapped back up and goes back in the pocket. Although...
Did they get in trouble?
They do. They after splashdown, they're still waiting for pickup, and they've got a corned beef sandwich, so they finish it off. It's floating in wherever they are, Indian or South Pacific Oceans. Apparently, Deke Slayton, who was the head of the astronaut office, he was also one of the Mercury 7, but he had been scratched due to a heart arrhythmia, I think, and ended up, never flying. So he ran.
He became a real scold later on.
He's always the crew-cutted scold in the movies. He apparently knew and did not say no. Oh, because he was the guy. Boys. Yeah, he would give the astronauts a little slack. He knew how hard that job was. Unfortunately, after landing, the press somehow found out.
Uh-oh. And they didn't think it was cute? Because we typically think that stuff is cute.
That's the kind of thing that would make space come alive, like...
Yeah, that's a Tom
astronauts,
Hanks.
They're just like us.
Yeah, or like a Tom Cruise. All the Toms.
It's a Tom Berenger, maybe?
It's a Tom Berenger style, laugh a minute.
It's what Tom Skerritt would do in space. He would eat a sandwich.
Dang that guy.
But it leads to a scandal because the rules have been broken. And this is a time when we are not, as I've said, uncritically these astronauts can do no wrong, like Gen X would consider, post Tom Wolfe generation. This is really like, We shouldn't be doing this. Look, what are these yo-yos doing now? They're eating a corned beef sandwich on rye.
It's so funny because you don't think of the 60s as being a time when you would criticize the America's best and the brightest. But of course, we're also starting to protest the war. We're starting to wear our Nehru jackets. Like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's very much a time of protest, and government trust is starting to drop as we get into the Johnson administration and Vietnam ramps up. And in this case, this actually becomes enough of a scandal that Congress holds hearings, and NASA executives, including James Webb himself, are trooped in front of Congress to answer the question of, like, how did these guys get away with this? Is this the kind of monkey shines you're running in your program?
Yeah, why aren't you frisking them? Why do their spacesuits even have pockets?
Well, they are allowed to bring some of their own stuff. They have a PPK, a personal preference kit, where they can bring some of their own stuff, which will figure into some of these other space smuggling stories.
Like their favorite toothpaste or a bunch of 50-cent pieces to give away to kids?
Everything has to be approved. After the sandwich incident, Deke Slayton releases a memo saying the attempt to bootleg any item on board not approved by me will result in appropriate disciplinary action. Mm-hmm. And the use of bootleg there is very interesting to me, because I don't think we today would use bootleg to mean to
take it on.
Yeah, to use illegally. I mean, bootlegging is a very specific kind of illegal use. I guess it goes back to making illegal booze, and today it's making illegal recordings, maybe. But today he's just using it to mean any illegal, any contraband.
And it's a verb. You would bootleg something.
To bootleg an item on board means to sneak it on board. To Deke. I don't know. Maybe these guys are just terrible at slang because they are Air Force and Navy weirdos.
Yeah, but those guys are Air Force and Navy weirdos are where half the slang comes from before we started using black slang.
I guess it's true. Yeah. Well, when we only had white people, we were like, well, I guess it's going to be pilots.
Yeah, it's like FUBAR.
The coolest people we can think of right now are pilots, because popular music is not good yet. And in fact, John Young officially got a reprimand for that.
I wonder what that looked like.
Yeah, I think
tisk.
So but that was not the last time. Despite Slayton's memo, that was not the last time people took things into space without telling mission control. Wally Schirra, the provider of the sandwich, got in on the act himself on a later Gemini mission in 1965. Gemini 6A and 6B, I think, took off at the same time. This was one of the. They didn't dock, but like, we're going to get them close enough to see if that works, and then next time they'll dock.
Oh, yeah, right. NASA was famous for that, like, you guys are going to get close to being in the record books.
You're going to see the moon.
Guys.
Exactly. Which, it means despite this crazy, accelerated, within this decade schedule they were working under, they weren't being foolhardy, right? There were test runs and trial runs.
That's the thing. If I had been running the space program, we would have been on the moon in 65, or
they all would have been dead.
Everybody would have burned up.
We put 8 dead white people on the moon under the Roderick program. In dead whitey on the moon. I think the black papers would have turned around.
I think they would have been into it. Gil Scott Heron would have been dead whitey on the moon.
But this is the famous flight where, because it's mid-December, I think they took off on December 15th. This is the famous flight where Wally Schirra and I can't remember who his co-pilot is, say they see an item in a low trajectory coming from north to south.
An UFO.
It's in a low Earth orbit, and that's when they pull out the stuff they brought on board without permission, which
Their
is
Nikon camera.
No, an 8-note Hohner harmonica and a tiny set of jingle bells. A tiny set of
it's Santa.
And they start playing jingle bells, and they're like, "Oh, look, we've seen Santa's sleigh." I don't know why they think he's flying on December 15th. Maybe he does trial runs also.
You work with what you have,
I guess.
If you're trying to get into the newspaper.
So they say they're seeing a satellite in a polar orbit, and this actually, Schirra's enough of a goof that this might have been something he set up. It's possible that this was
NASA did it.
A PR thing. But either way, it's delightful. It makes headlines.
They're test pilots, so from their perspective, Santa being up on December 15th in a low polar orbit, he's like making sure that the craft is seaworthy.
That's right. He doesn't trust the test guys at Edwards. So this is but he didn't have permission to bring up the tiny little thing of bells or the harmonica. This one's more benign. He doesn't get in trouble. In fact, the harmonica and the bells are in the Smithsonian today. You can see the exhibit of the first music, because it's the first music in space. No one had ever played music in space.
Oh, right.
And it wasn't very good, I'm sure, but
Yeah. I mean, all the UFOs are like, you call that music? Try this. Bum, 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 bum.
it's pretty good though. That's a bop.
Yeah, that's not
Just 5
it's a
notes,
jam.
and you can hum it
And
today.
you remember the disco version.
Is the times? Do they change the time signature? It's hard to dance
Bum,
to.
bum, 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 da, da, ba, ba, doo, doo, ba.
Yeah, we know today. This did not get out of the time. This did not make the transcripts, but we know that in 1962 on Schirra's Mercury capsule Sigma 7, there had also been contraband, but it's possible that Wally didn't know. Apparently, in flight, he discovered that Gordo Cooper had left him a little present for four Terryton cigarettes. Terryton, is that a 60s brand of cigarette?
Yeah.
A little half, a pack cut in half and shrunk down so it just holds 4 cigarettes, and a tiny bottle of scotch. That's
the
how the
premise
Mercury.
being that he
That's
was
how the
gonna
Mercury astronauts roll. He's going to smoke and drink in orbit.
And did he?
He doesn't say. Maybe upon arrival. Maybe that's more of a splashdown celebration.
I guess those
have a cigarette and a.
Mercury capsules were one use only, right? So if
Right.
he's blowing smoke into the altimeter, it's probably going to keep working.
And I think that Sigma might have been the one where the door like launched into his belly and gave him a bruise and proved that Grissom hadn't messed up, that the Mercury capsule doors really did suck,
Right.
So maybe to
But that was
to
Sherrod
bandage
just bailing out his buddy. Oh, the door!
No,
Ouch.
I think he had the bruises to prove it.
Oh, he did.
So maybe he needed a little scotch and the cool, refreshing taste of Terryton.
Oh, I suppose it might have been for the 2 hours that he's bobbing in the ocean waiting for the destroyer to get there.
Exactly. You got time then. That's what I'm saying. And the Russians were way ahead of us in terms
of drinking and
in terms
smoking
of drinking
space?
in space. Yes.
What, really?
Yes. I don't know if this probably will upend everything you think you know about the Russians, but they love a drink. It turns out. And their trademark move was on the way to the launch pad. They would say they needed to pee, hop out of the truck, go around, pee on the back wheel of the bus, and in so doing, put a little bottle of something in the pocket of their spacesuit.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that they put potatoes in and then they
In
brewed
space,
their
they
own.
would make. It actually wasn't vodka. The drink of choice for cosmonauts was cognac.
Oh.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe a little stronger. I don't know. Is that true?
It's a little imperialist.
That's what they're on top of the world, literally,
Yeah.
They're looking down on creation.
I mean, it's a little bit French, and you know the Russians and the French.
They had to pretend to pee to get their suit unzipped because they had to smuggle it inside their suit.
Oh.
So what's a way to get your suit unzipped after you've passed inspection?
Right.
Wait till you're in the truck and say you have to pee. And in fact, I think there were cases of people discovering empty bottles on Russian spacecraft for decades to come, hollowed out books with room for a little bottle, empty bottles in spacesuits, hidden in spacesuits, empty bottles hidden behind panels.
This is
the
like-
next crew would be like, oh boy.
This is Captain Haddock and Tintin Goes to Space.
Exactly right. Except without the moment where they actually get clean and sober. The problem with a lot of these contraband stories is there's a very strict weight limit. When you look at the numbers, it's something crazy like even in the 60s, it was $10,000 per gram or something. Just to get something out of Earth's gravity is incredibly expensive. So everything was made as light as it could be. And that's the problem. You bring a harmonica and that's, 78 grams that nobody was considering or whatever.
Right.
And
the astronauts are prepared to be flung into space to tumble forever because they brought a harmonica on board?
just because of bad math.
Or do they know that it's all just a sham and they could bring a cat if they
The
wanted?
Russians would get around it. They knew they had a strict weight limit, so they would just starve themselves for days in hopes of losing a couple pounds that they could then bring up in the form of vodka and cognac.
Right. And then
because Coach said they made weight.
the cognac hits them even harder because they're lightheaded already.
Now, some of these cases of smuggling are a little bit unofficial. Like only apparently one person knew that Alan Shepard wanted to golf on the moon in 71, whatever that was, Apollo 15 maybe?
Who was the one person that knew?
The mission director knew.
Oh. I thought you were going to say it was
his wife.
Sophia Loren.
He told Jack Nicklaus, Jack, F you, I'm going to golf on the moon, you son of a bitch. No, he had gone to a specialist and said, can you take a 6-iron head and put it on like a lighter collapsible thing? So he had to have this thing custom made. But nobody else who knew the flight plan knew about this. And the mission director had said, look, I won't tell. You can take your thing on board if it's in your personal PPK weight, but you cannot golf unless you've done every other mission objective. Like it's got to be like an end of day thing. And that's why the golfing on the moon was kind of brief. But Shepard was right. I mean, we remember that and we don't remember anything about
all the dumb science.
Their stupid rocks or tardigrades or whatever the hell they were doing.
And I mean, that just puts the lie to the whole business of them being white playboys.
That must have been Apollo 12 because it looks like exactly, because back then golf was for everyone.
Yeah, right.
I have a golf playing friend that I like to roast, and he was reading The Power Broker during COVID, like everyone was. And he sent me a page where Robert Moses is pushing for golf courses. And Robert Caro has to say, back then, golf was not the sport for the wealthy it was today. It was just a universally beloved pastime. So Moses was on the right side of history here and I was like, I don't think I believed that golf was for everyone. That's why all the clubs were full of people of color and Jewish golfers, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That must have been Apollo 12, actually, because 1972 is Apollo 14. And this is my personal favorite. Edgar Mitchell, one of only, 12 people ever to walk on the moon. You know what he brought into space without permission? He wanted to do the most important science imaginable. What would you bring if you had a personal science experiment to do?
Like a soap bubble gun.
Does Nerf work in space?
I mean, if you made
do T-shirt cannons work in space?
If you had a little oxygen container connected to a soap bubble gun and you sprayed soap bubbles all over low gravity moon, would they still be floating around? Would the moon's atmosphere be like space bubbles?
They'd freeze for a while,
I guess
right?
They would. I mean, I don't know. That just seems cool.
Does that make them more or less fragile if they freeze? I think they'd stick around for longer.
What would I bring to space? Well, it's a good question. What would you bring to space?
I mean, what has nobody ever tried up there? Like, I want to do one of those little games. It's a little tank of water, and you push the buttons, and you try to get the hoop over the thing.
Yeah, except it'd be a lot easier with the...
Would it be easier or harder? Nobody knows. Nobody's tried those in space.
Nobody knows the troubles I've seen.
Can you do Dance Dance Revolution on the International Space Station? Is there enough gravity?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I always felt like take a bunch of little crapola to give away to people.
That's coming up.
Was a good... That's
like what you want to do? You just want to eBay stuff?
That seemed like a good plan. No. Just like to give to friends.
I see.
You know, like when I went to Israel / Palestine / Jordan / Lebanon, I got a bunch of sand, a bunch of Jerusalem sand, put it in little vials, and I gave it to...
You didn't give me any.
All my friends. Well,
not your Gentile friends?
Not my Gentile friends, yeah. I figured that you already had all that stuff.
I'm a righteous Gentile. I would prize Jerusalem sand.
Oh, you would? Oh, well, I have one for you. Really. Now, see, now you're right. Like, nah.
My aunt does this thing where she has in her garden, she has sand from all the beaches she's visited.
That's nice.
But I often get dispatched to, collect sand for her.
Oh, so not the beaches she's visited.
Apparently, or I have.
All the beaches that someone got her some sand. Ken, it's winter now, but I'm still sleeping on my Miracle Made sheets. I really like them in the summer because they help regulate the temperature. I don't get too hot under these silver-infused sheets, but they're also great in winter. For the same reason. They
keep you nice and cool, but they regulate your temperature in the winter as well.
They do.
And they still have all their same bacterial fighting properties.
Yeah. In some sense, they actually are like self-cleaning. They kind of, the silver infused sheets actually are antibiologicals.
Sheets, pillowcases, and comforters, they'll prevent 99.7% of bacteria growth. Now, we haven't got rid of your problem. You still have to think about 0.3% of your bacterial growth, but we have vastly reduced it by a factor of like 300.
Well, and it's so much better for your skin, just the kind of, it's not just gross, it actually affects your pores, breakouts, acne. Miracle Made is really sleeping clean.
We've tried these out, and they are high quality sheets. You do not feel like you're in a science experiment just because they're NASA inspired futuristic sheets. Like, these are really nice sheets, and they're worth a try.
So here's what you do. You go to trymiracle.com/omnibus. That's trymiracle.com/omnibus to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, and this is the gift-giving season, if you order today, you can save over 40%.
Whoa.
And if you use our promo code OMNIBUS at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%.
There's a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you have nothing to lose. You're going to be 100% satisfied with your Miracle Made sheets. That's trymiracle.com/omnibus, trymiracle.com. Claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off.
That's trymiracle.com/omnibus to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Ken, I've been trying to cut my expenses lately. That's how you save money, is by not spending money.
Is that true?
Yeah. And looking at where I spend my money, it's a surprise. It was surprising to me how much I spend on food.
Eating out's expensive.
It is. And, often buying the ingredients at the supermarket to make a good home-cooked meal ends up being pretty expensive too, because a lot of that stuff, you buy it in a quantity and you don't use the whole quantity and it kind of sits there. And what I've discovered is Factor meals give me the perfect quantity, the perfect sort of like doable, manageable dinner, like home-cooked dinners, but far less expensive than eating out.
Yeah. Whatever your menu preference is, if you're trying to maximize protein, if you're trying to manage your calories, if you're vegetarian, whatever it is, they have a meal plan tailored to you. 35 different meals a week. And then you can add like 60 different options. If you want to add keto cookies, if you want to add juices or smoothies, this is healthy stuff.
And one of the things I loved about it was when I first signed up for Factor, I kind of said, hey, give me a selection of different styles. And I found there were vegetarian options that I wouldn't have expected how delicious they were.
Oh, yeah. We had cauliflower grits. I think I had the same experience, and I was like, wait, I guess I like cauliflower rice.
Yeah, they were really good. And if I were being more diligent about trying to eat vegetarian, this would be a great way to learn how to cook vegetarian food and make it delicious.
Just looking at these options now, truffle butter filet mignon, Peruvian shrimp and red pepper. Oh, those cauliflower grits. Sweet potato and chicken curry. This sounds like I'm getting hungry, actually.
Yeah, it's pretty good. There are lots of vegan options. I mean, it's a real game changer.
It's a busy time of year. Like, simplify your life. Take a lot of meal prepping and cleaning time off of your daily list of things to do with Factor. John, what can people do if they want to try Factor meals?
Here's what you do, and this is a really good deal. Head to factormeals.com/50, that's 50 Omnibus, and use the code 50 Omnibus to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping.
Wow. So 50 Omnibus is the code you should use at factormeals.com/50 Omnibus. 50% off your first box, and you'll get free shipping while your subscription is active.
Thanks, Factor Meals.
So Edgar Mitchell wants to do his own science. He does his own research. He brings 25, I think they're called Zener cards. Those cards that Bill Murray does ESP tests on at the beginning of Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
It's like three wavy lines, square, star. He brings those into space because he's apparently interested in the paranormal.
Oh, he is. He wants to see if...
He recently had a dinner party that had like no fewer than 4 psychics. I don't know if this is an average dinner for Edgar Mitchell.
Okay.
Because I don't think 4 would be an all-time high for me. And they're all curious. Hey, while you're in space, you know what we should do is see if ESP is better or worse in space.
If ESP works better in space.
Yes.
Wow.
So, but it's apparently, so he shuffles the cards all pre-launch, and they've been numbered, so he knows what number he's going to read them in. And
I want to point out to all the people who are like, science, that scientists are just a bunch of spooky action at a distance people too.
This guy's an astronaut. He's flown planes.
And the scientists are like, he's just a nothing. He's a pilot. He's
and
not a scientist.
What he wants to know is if somebody back on Earth can predict as he goes through these decks what cards are coming up.
But not in real time.
He wanted to do in real time. He wants to do 6 20-minute sessions.
But how is he communicating with them without NASA saying, "Hey, stop it"?
I think they already know when his breaks are going to be.
Oh,
and so he's using his pre-scheduled breaks to do these stupid.
Shouldn't he be taking a nap? Isn't there? I mean, even their breaks, don't they have something to do?
Yeah, and they never sleep well because they're always so hyped up and busy. Everybody talks about how you just get dumb and underslept in space. It sounds awful. It sounds like being on Amazing Race or something.
One more thing I'm not going to do for that reason.
So he doesn't have time to do all 6 sessions, but he does 4 of them. And he proudly announces upon landing that, there's 5 different designs of cards, and he goes through the deck, a 25 deck, 4 times or whatever. So you'd expect to have only 40 right guesses. And 2 of his psychics guessed 51 out of the 200.
Come on.
Correctly.
It proves it.
Look at that.
Proves it once and for all.
Look how good, because it's, I guess, apparently just the atmosphere is what's getting in the way of ESP.
Yep.
If we could just be in a vacuum or have no gravity or something.
Except isn't the people on the ground? I mean, it has to go through the atmosphere.
It's further away.
Yeah.
ESP gets better as the sender is farther.
Uh-huh.
That proves that there's no telekinetic aliens.
More atmosphere it has to go through. It amplifies it.
That's what it is.
Yes.
That's what it is. So you were talking about taking stuff into space for money, and that's where things really get dicey. Apollo 15, 1972, had the bright 3 astronauts on board, Scott, Worden, and Irwin. I think Scott and Worden walked on the moon. Al Worden actually... I think his daughter lives next to my parents out on the Olympic Peninsula.
Really?
Yeah,
Does she have a bunch of space stuff?
They're always getting Al Worden stories. Well, they may have some of these. They decided to bring 400 postal covers into space. They just look like envelopes, but they're like kind of... The post office now prints its own commemorative first day of issue envelopes to get stamp weirdos to buy this stuff too.
Why wouldn't they just bring the stamps? It seems like the covers would be a lot bulkier.
Yes, that's true. But the covers, I guess, maybe you can sign. Oh. It's easier to autograph. So traditionally, like I've signed stamps for people, and they never want me to sign a commemorative stamp. They want me to sign a stamped first day postal cover.
I get it.
And they had cooked up this plan with this West German guy that they would bring this stuff into space, which they could then, maybe they'd postmark it from the Okinawa, from the battleship when they landed, and then they would, they'd sign everything, and then they could sell them for a certain amount of money. Each of the astronauts would take home, I think that each astronaut took home $7,000.
Well, that's probably what they were making a year.
That's $50K today. It's not an inconsiderable amount of money. And the astronauts were underpaid enough that they worried about their families. Like famously, everybody from Apollo on and maybe earlier, I know Neil and Buzz did this. They signed a ton of stuff and left it with their wives because they were like, if we die, all you have is our crappy pension.
Right. This is what you're going to put the kids through college.
This is your nest egg. It's like, well, they died, but at least now their autographs are super valuable. But this West German guy apparently made a ton of money on these guys.
So they pulled this off. This happened.
They took all the stuff to the moon. They had also smuggled on board a little aluminum plaque called the Fallen Astronaut that had the names of U.S. and Soviet lives lost in the space race. Oh. And they left that on the moon.
Oh, so that's a bigger deal. dropping stuff off on the moon.
Yeah, I guess.
What happened to the golf ball?
Golf balls are still there. There's a ton of stuff on the moon. A ton of human poop on the moon. They would leave all their the waste products from the journey on the moon.
That is so
American.
That's so just
just
human.
they're
Like, I don't want this poop.
They're littering already.
And of course, all the astronauts can be cloned by UFOs now because they just take the poop and turn it into astronauts.
That's why I would tell them not to do it. This turned out to be a whole thing because, first of all, the Belgium sculptor who had produced the fallen astronaut plaque started to...
was a communist.
He was a communist, probably. He was Belgian, I already said. No, he made hundreds of replicas of them and started selling them by mail. So now he's capitalizing on NASA. And then these guys come back with their 400 postal covers that have been to the moon and spend hours on the flight home after splashdown signing them. They give them to their West German contact who immediately makes a ton of money. And NASA's already getting worried about the look of this. Like on the previous mission on Apollo 14, they'd taken up these commemorative coins for the Franklin Mint, but then the Franklin Mint had been, the astronauts just taking them in their personal PPKs. The Franklin Mint had then melted them down and was like giving a tiny bit of moon metal to every new subscriber who bought their stupid
nobody saw that
chess
coming.
Sets or whatever. And it's a really bad look. So this actually does lead to Senate hearings. Scott, Warden, and Irwin all have to testify about their part in the affair. None of them ever flew again. They were
what
the public
for this reason.
The public outcry was such that now, within NASA, everybody was like, "Yeah, we've all been doing this. We know." But they all just kind of got shuffled to different administrative things because as astronauts, their careers were over.
I mean, it is like really déclassé, like low, right?
It's a bad look.
To be peddling trinkets.
In 83, I think Warden actually sued NASA or the Justice Department or both.
I thought you were going to say the Franklin Mint.
No, saying that they shouldn't have been, I think there was some kind of, like if you sign this, it'll go away kind of a thing. And he felt like, but you can't talk about this. And he said, government agencies can't have this kind of NDA. This is unconstitutional.
But also like the government, the military can fire you when it wants.
Famously, out of a cannon. So yeah, I think you and I were like, yeah, astronauts shouldn't be hawking this stuff.
Right. But then again, the president of the United States was selling steaks and water, right? College degrees. So.
Yep. And we're recording this in October. He might be doing it again.
I still don't know who that is.
The Soviets had their biggest scandal was a bunch of chocolates that somebody snuck on board Soyuz 29 in 1978. The chocolates got everywhere, and it was actually kind of a in-mission crisis.
Oh, because they're not capitalists, so they weren't trying to sell it. They were just like, I love chocolate.
Yeah, exactly.
I love chocolate.
Every Soviet citizen gets abundant chocolate, John. Did you not know this?
All the bananas they can eat and chocolate for days. I don't think that's true.
The stories of space contraband kind of dry up once there's more people in space. It doesn't mean that there's less smuggling going on. It probably just means it's less remarkable and it's not ex-Navy pilots doing it anymore.
Yeah, that's actual physicists.
Well, there's tons of people going into orbit now, including tourists.
Yeah, and I bet you they all have something in their pockets.
So right? it really takes something remarkable to happen for there to be a story about space contraband anymore. But it finally happened a couple of years ago.
Was it when Elon Musk smuggled a Corvette into space?
Elon Musk brought all his Rick and Morty memorabilia into space illegally. See, that's the thing. Once space is effectively privatized, there will be no regulation anymore, and space smuggling will end because Elon can bring adaptogenic mushrooms into space all he wants.
Right. It won't end because there's still the spice.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You can't navigate without spice.
Right.
But until spice is discovered, I think there won't be a lot of headlines about this. The last really good headline was in 2008.
Whoa.
Well, in 2001, the Russians, no longer the Soviets, began taking tourists to space
They did.
For the first
that's
time.
right. And it cost like $1 million.
Yeah, the first guy was Dennis Tito. He paid, I don't know, $20 million. He's just some scientist who's had a lot of patent money or something, and he wanted to go to space. And it started the trend of like tech people with a lot of money.
And this was like low Earth orbit too, right? It was just like up and down.
They would usually get to the Mir or ISS depending on the era.
Oh, okay.
Some were just up and down. For example, I'm redoing one of my kids' books. There's going to be a new reissue of them, and so I'm
take out all the slurs.
Well, I think we talked about that, but the mythology book,
Right.
you can no longer say that people are old or that Hephaestus is, the gods crippled him, for example. Some more inclusive language for the Greeks. But the space one, it's just all these space records that have been superseded in the decade since the book came out.
Oh, interesting.
And so there's one point where I talk about how many people have ever been in space at one time. And it turns out depending on where you put the line of where space starts, it got quietly beaten a couple of years ago because there was a full complement on board the ISS, and then some dopes did an interorbital tourism flight, including Michael Strahan, the former NFL player and now TV host, who I've met a couple times. So I guess I've worked with an astronaut now. There have now been, 19 people in space at once because...
And then one guy in a balloon tied to a lawn chair.
You can't count the high diver guy or whatever. But yeah, a lot of them are just straight up, this little launch got above the Carmack line or whatever it's called.
Right. And do they still give you a medal? I guess you have to be in the Air Force to get it, right?
Do you think it's just inherent,
badge?
like space itself gives you a medal, like it can tell?
Well, no, but like
here you go.
If you go to a swim meet, you're going to get some kind of ribbon.
You would want a souvenir for sure.
But you would want it to be like authenticated by some agency that's like, no, he really did go to space. It seems like he's just making it up. But it
seems like Shatner's just telling stories again.
Yeah.
But no, we let him go to real space.
Actual space.
The sixth space tourist of this era, after Dennis Tito went, was a guy named Richard Garriott. This may have come up on the show before because I think he was the first one whose name nerds would recognize. Like he was the first... like Will Wheaton type to go to space.
What's his job? He was
a video game designer in the 70s and 80s, which means Gen X gamers remember his Ultima franchise.
Yeah.
Do you remember the Ultima games? Basically, fantasy role-playing on a computer as we know it is largely the invention, the adaptation at least, of this guy.
Really?
And he wrote himself into all his games via his... kind of nerd world, possibly Ren Fair alter ego of Lord British.
Lord British.
So it would be like, this game's by Lord British. And then in the game, you would like go see Lord British and he would be like, thou hast more experience points than before. I now dub thee a squire.
Was he British or fake British? Did he speak in a British accent?
I believe he had American parents from Oklahoma, but he was raised in Cambridge.
Yeah.
In fact, his dad was on Skylab. His dad was a space guy.
Oh, cool.
So Lord British, by virtue of the fact that he had been British born in Cambridge, England.
That's how he got to be Lord British.
That's how that became his handle on the bulletin boards or whatever.
So I'm Lord Kingston by that. That's
Lord
pretty
Kingston's,
good.
That just sounds like you're a calypso musician.
I know, Lord Kingston.
Tell me what some of his songs would be, John.
Lord Kingston?
I ride the ferry to Edmonds.
Yeah, everybody gets a chocolate.
When he went into space in 2008, he did a good deed that he did not talk about for many, many years. I don't know if you remember this, but actor James Doohan, who had played Scotty on Star Trek.
Which version of Star Trek?
He was in this original show. Captain, the warp engines, they cannot stand the strain.
James Doohan.
They're going to blow. Yeah.
I feel like I met him.
He was here, which I didn't know. Like he died in Redmond. He had a house out on the east side, which I did not know.
I feel like there was some event, some Comic-Con or whatever, where I met
That's cool.
Lieutenant Uhura.
Oh, wow.
And she was extraordinary, but I feel like I met Doohan too.
She's like pretty inspirational figure as far as bridging the space is bad for for the community. Space is bad for us around the way.
Right.
Like by being without ever going into space, but by being like a high profile black woman associated with the dream of space. I think she changed a lot of hearts and minds. And black astronauts routinely like name check her as the reason why they wanted to go into space.
Is that right?
Yeah. James Doohan had died in 2005. He'd had a ton of trouble, health troubles, Parkinson's symptoms, but also some kind of fibrosis, I want to say. He was in a bad way, died in his 80s. And he had really kind of bought into the whole inspirational, what Star Trek means to the country kind of thing. And he wanted to be buried in space. He wanted his ashes to do what he never got to do in life. And
I like that. I mean, that's romantic. That's sentimental.
It's great. And it finally happened in 2012, some SpaceX. I think earlier there had been a suborbital flight where for PR reasons they were like, yeah, give us a couple of molecules of Scotty and we'll get him up there. And of course the headlines are irresistible. Because he's getting beamed up in a way.
Over and over.
Although you'd think the metaphor's not right. He's the one doing the beaming with the shifters, like whatever those are called in a music studio. What do you call those little things you go up and down on the...
they're faders.
On the faders, yeah. He's working the faders to get people back to the Enterprise. He's not actually usually the one beaming up himself.
He can't get enough power. I wonder if I were the one trying to write the headline, whether I would have found a way to incorporate getting enough power. I'm sure I would have.
Is that from the Star Trekkin' song, or is this a Dr. Demento reference?
I can't get enough power, Captain.
So a suborbital flight had taken up a few little molecules of him, but it wasn't until this SpaceX demo flight in 2012 that they gathered a bunch of cremains from people who had this wish, and kind of as a headline grabbing thing, these people got to go to space.
And they got all mixed together in some kind of weird, when the UFOs
That's a good question.
collect that stuff and make a thing, it's going to be a weird thing. And I'm not sure I want to see the...
Because if you separate them in little, even if it's just in little... popping plastic things, that's a lot of added package material that you don't want.
Right. And I mean, I don't know. It just seems like some scene from The Fly starring Jeff Goldblum.
But in 2020, I think Garriott announced on Twitter, and in fact, maybe Doohan's son announced on Twitter, and then Garriott confirmed it that weekend at Dragon Con or something.
Boy,
this is how news happens now, by the way.
Somebody tweeted about it at Dragon Con. It must be real.
I get all my news from Dragon Con. That he had, when he did his space tourism up to the International Space Station, he had, in collaboration with the Doohan family, quietly gotten 3 laminated cards that, name-checked Scotty and his great contributions to Starfleet warp design or warp engine design or whatever, and had included some of his cremains, and he had brought all 3 of them aboard without permission, and had taken 2 of them back, and now that he's got 2 space ones, kept one for himself and given one to Doohan's surviving heirs, next to kin, but he slipped the 3rd one under the floor of the ISS without telling anybody.
Oh, so it's still there.
He smuggled Scotty into space in 2008, where apparently he has been for the last 15 years, unbeknownst to anyone, including NASA or Roscosmos or anybody, I think. And Scott.
And so is it now a scavenger hunt? Like first astronaut to find Scotty?
Who's finding Scotty? First astronaut to snort Scotty wins a prize. No, but I think he felt like the statute of limitations had expired, and nobody was going to come after him now for leaving a little laminated Scotty up in space.
He probably waited until he was like, am I going back? No, they're not going to have me back. That's not where I'm going to spend my money.
I guess you don't want to announce it while you're still up in space, and they can conceivably leave you there or push you out an airlock.
Right, turn off your oxygen.
I'm afraid I can't do that, Dave.
And that concludes Space Contraband.
Space Contraband.
Entry 1194.JB1312. Certificate number 54825 in the omnibus. Futurelings, social media should be put in the airlock and ejected into space, never to be seen again.
Well, the guy who's most into it is now super into space, so...
What are the chances that we will lose Elon to space?
Wouldn't that be
Does
great?
he go on any of these? He doesn't, does he? Has he been?
He wants to. I
It
don't.
seems like he would have done.
I mean, it'd be great.
Maybe we'll lose him to space sometime soon, hopefully.
I mean, it will help. Like the more dumb people get interested in space, and the less cool people get interested in space, the more likely you are to lose dumb people. It's gonna.
Oh, I see what you're
it's
saying.
gonna be like the COVID effect, where like, redder areas got more hollowed out.
They'll be rolling coal up to space, and they realize, hey, you just used up a bunch of coal fuel that you could have used to get higher into space, and now you're going to plummet to your death.
You brought all that chew into space, and it's very heavy.
I was thinking
You should
about
bring Terryton cigarettes. They're light.
I was thinking about how many people involved with the Tesla Corporation, who are like legit people,
Yeah.
are just like wherever they are, just every time he leaves the building, they're just hoping like get hit by a trolley. And I wonder if that happened, whether Tesla would become cool with liberals again. And liberals are like, oh, it's cool again because Tesla actually is pretty cool cars, or whether it's just tarnished forever.
They're pretty good. Yeah, I don't know how. Is there a sense that it's institutionally a problem?
Well, nobody wants a Tesla truck, which would have been cool, but now they're emblematic of Lamos.
They never would have been cool with that design, right?
Well, I mean, when they first rolled out the design, I was like, "Oh, that's cool."
Ah, they got you.
But
they got you. I never thought it was cool.
There wasn't a truck yet, and it just seemed like, "Oh, that's weird and cool." You know, it looks weird now.
Yeah.
But so did the Pontiac Aztec, and now we all agree it's the coolest car that ever was built.
When I see those Rivian pickups driving around with their weird lozenge-shaped headlights,
I don't like that
I'm not in
headlights.
favor of that.
No, but the idea of a truck that was also battery
That
powered.
reminds me, I have a friend that works at Rivian. She's like an attorney there, and
Is she going to get us free Rivians?
yeah, probably.
Okay.
What's the plural of Rivians?
Rivians?
Rivendell?
Rivanians?
I want free Rivia. My brother looked up her LinkedIn. He's like, wow, she's at Rivian now. And then he saw her background is like some shoot me to Mars ticket. And he was like, your friend at an EV company, is she like some Elon nutjob now? And it turns out, no, she just signed up for something where you put your name on a microchip, and like 10 million people got their names shot to Mars.
I see.
Which I totally would have done if I had known about in time. I want my name on Mars.
Did you get your name on a tile in the Pike Place Market?
I have a KEXP tile, and
Does it just say KEXP, or does it say Ken? Oh, I
No,
see.
it's at KEXP,
I
yeah.
get it.
No, I named it after our family group chat just to annoy the kids because
Yeah.
they were not pitching on anything better.
And what's it called?
It now says
Schmoobs?
Jennings Hype House.
Oh, Jennings Hype House.
It's very high up.
That's pretty cool.
I should have done the market. Is it too late?
I think the new market steps appear to have some kind of
Yeah.
name thing, but it's not the cool old like get an actual tile in the market. It's some other kind.
I think I can do the locks. I think I can still do the locks.
They have tiles at the locks.
Yeah, they have like fish. I think when they redid the salmon ladder, they let people sponsor a little stainless steel.
Get
salmon.
your name in history. There's a out here in Burien, they tore down the old elementary school, and I think if you went to the elementary school, you could get your name on a tile at this little park. Apparently, this is probably all across the country. If somewhere in your part of Western Indiana, you have your name on a tile, be sure to write Ken and John at ken@omnibusproject@gmail.com. You can find us at
That's
Ken
not right.
Jennings.
What
and
is it? What is
it's
it?
at the omnibusproject@gmail.com.
There we go. That's what it is.
You can mail us things, including a Polaroid of the tile, or better, $50 bills wrapped in like a moon sock.
We would like to see people's names on tiles if
Yeah.
you supported a local infrastructure project.
Yeah, it feels like that's a thing that you might find on the Futurelings fan group page on Facebook or Reddit or Discord or all the other places. So if you have gotten your name on a tile and you don't mind doxing yourself by putting it on the internet, go show it there. And more than anything, we'd love it if...
More than anything.
We'd love it if you would go to patreon.com/omnibusproject and support our project of sending me and Ken, or at least some surprise from us, up into space to bug Wally Schirra.
The late Wally Schirra, whose ghost still haunts Earth orbit, low Earth orbit.
It does.
Some say.
And as we zoom past him, or some, little packet of us zooms past him, we'll be like,
A lot of people don't know this, but your ghost haunts whatever the highest elevation you got to in your life.
oh,
If you lived in Denver, your ghost is always a mile up. But if you ever went to space, your ghost just hangs out
in space.
above.
Ghost in space.
Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we so fear may never come. If the worst comes soon, though, this recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, on a happier note, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.